Economically and politically, we are in a challenge that we haven't faced in our lifetime. Corruption has hit an all-time high. Let's go through some of that data today. Now, I'd like to say that at the Money GPS, it differs from a lot of the others here on YouTube and a lot of the analysis you'll see on TV, because this is not just the financial side. We need to look at this from every single angle because they attack us with full spectrum dominance. So we need to get in there and we need to realize from all different angles how this is happening. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. This is out of the New York Times. Afghan opium cultivation rises to record levels. That's right. In Afghanistan, where they are supposedly making everything okay, they went in there well over a decade ago and there has been no semblance of order been restored there. Let's go down just very briefly. I want to scroll down and read this first little part that said Afghan opium cultivation again rose to a historic level in 2014. The UN officials reported on Wednesday. And then they're saying how deeply entwined the drug trafficking and the Afghan political system have become. Now, why is this the case? I mean, the US is in there and other countries are in there and they're there to make everything just fine. But we know that isn't happening. In fact, if we went back in time and looked at Geraldo Rivera, Fox News went in there and actually showed, you may have seen this clip yourself, but he actually went there and spoke to the military who was there not only guarding the area where they're growing the opium, but actually helping them along with it. They're actually aiding and abetting this criminality. And what he said was, well, it's just what they do, but, we're trying to help them out. We're trying to help them grow other crops and everything. So they're protecting them. And right now we're looking at a time where there has never been more opium production from this nation. And they're getting into this more and more because it's being protected. The drug trade in Afghanistan fuels terrorism, and that's a little bit skewed, let's say, because it is really the funding behind all of this that is fueling this terrorist activity. We're looking at the opium production being very minimal out of Afghanistan previously. And ever since then, we're over 90% of the opium production of the world coming from Afghanistan. This is something very, very telling to me, and I know it is to you as well. And the mainstream media will not cover this information. Fox News made it seem like everything was being taken care of and that they would be fixing this problem, but it is anything but the case. Let's go on. Brent slips below $80 as the Saudis refuse to get into oil price war. So I just wanted to connect in with this and basically say that the Saudis are not going to get into the price war. They say they're not going to reduce how much they're pumping. They want to continue pumping that oil and get it out of the ground, and they will do so supposedly, but something to look for in the future. Now, speaking of oil, we need to look at this. The governments around the world subsidize this oil, and that's what's happening. $88 billion a year from the G20 is going into subsidizing the oil. So is the oil really that cheap if our governments are spending $88 billion on it every single year in order to get it out of the ground? Something's not right about this, and there is more to know in this category, but regardless, what I want to say is that this is all interconnected, and we can see how resources, whether it's drugs, whether it's the oil, they're all very important to those who control this system, and they are using them as tools against us. We need the oil in order for our daily lives to continue. We don't necessarily need the opium, but we need these to continue. They know that they have a stranglehold on the public, and they will certainly use that for their political advantage. Now, on that part of oil, I wrote about this in my book. This part of the world, and I'm referring to the Middle East, holds some of the best oil available and for a cheap price. If this flow is disturbed, the price can skyrocket. This will cause a recession very quickly, which is quite the opposite of what we need right now. And that's right, because the world needs to have cheap or relatively cheap oil for everything to continue. If oil went back up to its historic highs, it would absolutely put a damper on the economy, and that is absolutely what we don't need right now. The world needs cheaper oil, but of course they say that too cheap of oil is a big problem as well. There is a balance, and that is with any commodity. That's, you have the investor side and you have the consumption side. So there are a lot of different things to look at here. And once again, it's being used as a political tool. Brazil begins laying its own internet cables to avoid U.S. surveillance. They want to run a internet cable from all the way from Brazil all the way to Portugal. That is one hefty wire that's going to have to go across there. This is out of the Washington Post, and just want to note, by mentioning this is part of that whole BRIC nations, how they are going out of their way to avoid the West, and they're doing so very, very aggressively in many different ways. This is just one of them. Whether or not it's going to work or not, that is certainly a different story, but let's look at this from a different angle and realize what is happening. This is out of Reuters, and this is where it comes down to all of this video I've been discussing here. We're looking at this and we expect that the governments, or we should expect that the governments would take care of us, the governments would be here to protect us, to regulate. But we've seen the failure of the FDA, we've seen the failure of the SEC, and look at this right here. The banks have been allowed to investigate themselves. One source familiar with the investigation told Reuters the investigator decided what they would want to investigate, what they would admit to, and how much they will pay. That's when you know there are extreme levels of criminality going on right now. We had Wachovia, which is Wells Fargo. They were laundering approximately $80 billion of drug money. Now they investigate themselves, and then they decide to pay a small fine, and that's it. They wash their hands clean of it. You cannot make this stuff up. This is crazy. They investigate themselves. It's no different than Monsanto doing their own safety studies and submitting that to the government. How can we trust these people? We cannot. That's why I'm saying corruption is at a very all-time high right now. And you're looking at this, how they control all the systems. They control the drug trade. They control the oil and the rest of the commodities. And they are basically using these against us. These are weapons against us. Even if you personally don't use these things, you are indirectly affected by it. And that is the biggest problem that I'm seeing. And now right here in the banking, the economic, political sector, you are looking at this, and this is, to me, a huge problem when they can investigate themselves. Of course, they're not going to show their worst side. That certainly doesn't make any sense to me. And this is also connected here. NBC News, few signs of construction in China's Manhattan Republica. And what they're essentially saying here, if I just scroll down just briefly, you could see this. It's basically a replica of Manhattan, an entire city, another ghost town being built in China. And they're saying this is going to be for the booming business. We're going to need this big city. And they built entire cities that are empty. This is freaky to look at, and they are doing this all over China. This is the most massive public works project that has ever been designed. Now, the reason I mention this is that the U.S. is really crashing down on its own. The West is crashing down on its own, and China is keeping afloat. And one of the major reasons they're doing so is these public works projects. We are basically being supported by fiat. These ghost towns are fiat. The money printing, the QE, that's all fiat. It's all fake. It's being held up by a crutch that is non-existent. This is really what the public isn't looking at. If they would just stare at it, they would see that there is no crutch there. It is being held up by nothing, and it's all going to come down. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to become an insider. The Insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free, and that is available at moneygps.com. Scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.